All right, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining today. Many of you probably already know me or have seen my face before, but my name is Lila Roselle, and I'm on the marketing team here at JazzHR. And I am joined by my partner in crime and product manager, John Volpe, to run through our latest update today and provide you all with a comprehensive look at our new roles and privileges. Hey, John.
Hey, Lila. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to just run through some quick housekeeping today. If you've never attended a webinar with us before, we're just going to go through this really quick before we dive right in. We always record and share out the slides after each webinar, so don't worry if you have to jump up and take a phone call. You can go back and review what you missed with the recording. We'll also answer all questions at the end, so feel free to punch them into the chat box there on the left, and we will get to them at the end. If you're having technical issues with your sound or your picture, you can type ReadyTalk Test My Computer into your Google search or type this link into your browser. I know you guys can't click on it right now, but if you type that link in there, that'll give you some troubleshooting tips and kind of help you sort that out. So definitely if you're having trouble or the sound isn't coming through or it's iffy, that'll help you troubleshoot all that. Alrighty, so here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to briefly go over what the old roles were, and then we'll introduce our new roles and talk about some of the changes. And you're going to see an inside look on how all of these work so that when you want to switch over some of your users or your administrators, you'll have the opportunity to do that. So some of you probably know this or you're familiar with our old roles. You had the admin, user, and a recruiter. The admin was the master of the account with the ability to do and see just about everything, and users had limited access to candidate profiles that could be slightly restricted by account privilege overrides. And then the last was the recruiter account, which is meant for external recruiters or agencies you would work with to have access to JazzHR. So if you're bringing in an external recruiter and you wanted to give them some sort of limited access to submit or track candidates, that would be the former recruiter account. So likely all of you are familiar with these, but I just wanted to give a quick overview so when we're talking about how things have changed, you have a little bit of a reference point. So what do your old roles mean now? So I know a lot of you might be wondering, what can people see now? Is there a big drastic change? So luckily, there hasn't been a huge shift in the access of what people can see. So don't worry too much about what your users can see now. So there's only a slight tweak. So all admins have now been moved over to super admins, and we'll go into the details of what a super admin is in a minute. But the main things is that they can now access account-wide privileges, which before only account owners could see. And they can see billing information, but they could before, so it's not a whole big change there. But they're now known as super administrators. And like I said, we'll walk through the different levels of admin so that you can kind of switch those accordingly. But basically, anyone who was an admin before isn't going to see a whole lot of difference. They'll just have access to the privileges page in the settings tab. And users are now super users. So we represented them as Ant-Man because Ant-Man's awesome. And they can now access templates under settings, and that's really the main difference between the former user and a super user's level of visibility into things today. So if you want to downgrade them to a recruiting user, which we'll talk about in a second, you can, but that's pretty much the only difference. So don't worry, nobody's seeing crazy new things that they hadn't seen before. They just have that access to that settings section or templates under settings. So I'm going to pass it over to John, and he's going to talk about some of the new levels of admins and users, and then talk about some of the new roles and privileges as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Lila. So yeah, guys, I'm going to go through dive into each of the 7 roles that were either updated or added through this most previous launch. Now, kind of like Lila mentioned, obviously going from 3 roles into 7, one of our main goals here were to give you all more granular levels of roles and permissions to fit your recruiting landscape. So as we know, depending on the size of your company or just the maturity of the recruiting inside of your company, the different roles and the different hats that people wear, sometimes it's hard to find a system that kind of fits your recruiting needs kind of seamlessly. So the hope here is that we've kind of designed these in a way where this kind of fits your recruiting landscape, and we can kind of go through any specific questions you have at the end. So again, as we go through these, feel free to type into the chat box. We definitely want to answer as many questions as we can. So let's dive into the first new role, which is the super administrator. Like Lila mentioned previously, admins, there should be, in a perfect world, maybe one or just a few of these on your account. They can access billing information. They can really change the account-wide privileges for all the admins and users, and they can add other super users. One big difference between the super user and the next role that I'll talk about, recruiting admin, is that the super user can view hidden candidates. So if you guys aren't familiar with what a hidden candidate is inside of JazzHR, essentially it is the ability to hide the candidate from everybody else in the account. This is really good for once you hire somebody, because oftentimes that hire may be introduced into Jazz as a hiring manager, and you don't want them to see kind of their account and the notes that were left on them. So you can mark a candidate as hired and then hidden, so the super admins can only view them. So I'm going to just take a quick jump into super admin, just to show you kind of what that looks like in the app here. So again, it is exactly what an admin could see before. Just to touch on a couple changes that are app-wide, more of a nomenclature thing, is admin, which this main navigation item used to be referred to as admin, and is now settings. And the other main change for the navigation is people is now nested inside of settings as opposed to being a main navigation item. So to manage your users, to create these new roles, you will go into settings, people, and this page probably looks very similar. There wasn't really update to how this looks or how it functions. We kind of just moved it into the settings. So again, for super admin, they have full access to everything here, including privileges, which towards the end of the kind of presentation here, we'll go in depth into what these mean, what they can be used for, in each individual override. But just know that super admins can access this, and then they can also access the billing information on the account. So that's the main functionality of a super admin. Again, should be a limited amount of these in your account. So let's go back to the slides, and next we're going to talk about the recruiting administrator. So pretty standard here. Again, cannot view billing or account information, cannot view hidden candidates, and they will have full access to templates and workflows and actually reports. So that's going to be another big one. If you are an admin, you have access to reports. If you're not an admin, you do not have access to reporting. So it's one thing that we didn't mention in the slide here, but I want to make sure is definitely apparent. And the last piece here is they cannot change the overall account privileges like we just mentioned. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And we're going to jump over to what a recruiting admin sees. So again, similar view to the super admin. Like I mentioned, settings changed, admin changed to settings, and the only thing that they cannot see here is the privileges tab, and then also they can't access billing information. But again, pretty simple here, the difference between a super admin and a recruiting admin. So let's go into the next role. So this next role is super user. Again, like Lila mentioned, this is previously referred to as the user, with one kind of big kind of add-on from what a user could do in the past. So again, they can't view hidden candidates, they can't access billing information or privilege overrides, but they can access templates. So that's the big one. That might be the main reason why you might take what was a previous user, now super user, and move them into a more limited role like recruiting user, which we'll get to in a second. So I just wanted to, this is the big reason why you might take somebody down a notch from super user. So let's dive in and see what that looks like. Cool. So again, here are the main navigation items for a super user. The only thing that they'll have access to now is they will have settings. And within settings, they will have one tab called templates, and they will be able to manage, create, edit any of the templates. So questionnaires, interviews, evaluations, emails, and categories. So just note that this role can edit the automated reply to candidates. They can create new. They can edit existing templates. We kind of see this role in Jazz as, maybe this is a good role for an internal recruiter that is kind of siloed in the types of roles that they recruit for. So they don't need to see all jobs and all candidates by default. But essentially, if you want to limit their access on a per job basis, you can do that with a super user, which you can't do with an admin. So that would be another main reason, kind of like it exists today between admin and user, is that users can kind of have their visibility sectioned off on a per job basis. And again, this might be a really good role for an internal recruiter, or maybe a hiring manager at a smaller company that takes more of a role and more initiative in their recruiting aspects, and they would need to do things like create interview guides for themselves and their teams, or to create questionnaires that they want to ask the candidates to kind of be able to screen them by. So that's kind of the main aspects of a super user. Some of these things are going to become more clear whenever we talk about the privilege overrides and user privilege overrides as well. That's where some of these different roles can become a little bit more powerful, or taking away some things from specifically the super user and the recruiting admin. Okay, so let's jump down to the recruiting user. So again, this is pretty much a new role inside of Jazz. So the difference between a super and recruiting user mainly is they don't have access to templates, and they can't modify kind of the workflow template side. So they don't even have privileges to access the settings area is kind of the main difference. Again, there's going to be some kind of privilege overrides that you'll be able to do, but you'll be able to kind of select if they can create or edit jobs or things like that. So the main difference again is they just cannot access the settings area, which means they cannot manipulate the templates inside the account. The recruiting user is perfect for pretty much any hiring manager, any collaborator really that needs to be able to see the candidate profile. So as a recruiting user, they would be coming in, they would be leaving comments, discussing with other users about the candidate. So really engaged inside of Jazz, and again, a great role for your typical hiring managers. So let's go and see what that role looks like. So as you can see, the recruiting admin has a limited view into Jazz. And I'm sorry, for some reason, let me just make a quick update here. I want to show you what kind of jobs and what the candidate profile looks like for that user as well. We do have jobs restricted to users. So essentially, users can only see jobs in which they're on the hiring team. Currently in the app, that is a per job override or an account-wide setting where you want to set if users can only see jobs that they're on the hiring team for. Admins obviously can see all jobs and all candidates at all times. So that's kind of one of the levers that you kind of want to play around with and see what fits best for your recruiting. But for example, this recruiting user account that we're in right now, their main functionality is to get in, work with candidates. They can still email candidates. They can have discussions with candidates. They can request feedback. They can add candidates to this job if they're going to, passively recruit. So they have kind of once they're granted access to a job, they have full kind of recruiting tools just for that job and those candidates. One caveat to that for both super and recruiting users is that they cannot access candidates that are not associated to jobs. So just if you're passively recruiting and you're adding a lot of candidates into Jazz, those roles will not be able to see candidates that are not tied specifically to a job. So just one other kind of heads up there. That is the main difference between a recruiting user and a super user. Awesome. So now we're going to move into some of our newer roles. So really the last 4 roles that we went over were more of a division of what we previously had in the system. So we had admin that now became super admin and recruiting admin. And then we had user that was kind of divided into super user and recruiting user. So again, I would encourage you to essentially move admins and users down to the recruiting side to limit some of their visibility in some cases. Again, with the big caveats being super users can edit templates and recruiting admins cannot access billing. So those were kind of 2 things that we heard a lot of from our customers, from you guys, and that's moving them down kind of one peg. I think will really help with some of the roles and privileges issues that you guys were having in the past. And to that, we've also introduced some new roles. Again, this was related to directly related to feedback from you guys and all of our customers, really. It was providing even more granular roles. So these ones are more tied to the role that they are in your company or that they have in your recruiting process. The other 4 that we just went over are more generic access levels, where these new roles are really meant for the type of person that they are in your company or in your recruiting process. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the interviewer. This is a very limited role inside of Jazz. Again, the main goals of this person, they will have access to only the dashboard, and through the dashboard they will be able to see interview guides, the jobs that they're on, and they will be able to also refer the jobs that they're associated with. So that's another thing that I'll be able to show you and we'll be able to talk about in here. But one of the main reasons for adding a interviewer into Jazz, so one of the main goals or one of the main reasons to do that is for scheduling purposes. So having that person inside of Jazz will allow you to easily schedule them interviews. They'll be able to access our interview guides and complete the interview guides. But the good thing is they won't have any other access into Jazz. They won't be able to kind of move candidates around or, see discussions about candidates. This is really a role that's meant to, get in, understand a little bit about the person that they're interviewing, and leave their notes about if they think the person passed or failed the interview, and answer some interview questions, and then really kind of get out. So it's supposedly, it should be a super simple role, and their experience in Jazz should be very easy and seamless. Again, main goal, get their interview feedback inside of Jazz so the internal recruiters and the hiring managers can make decisions and move forward based on that feedback. So just give me 1 second, and we're going to go ahead and see what an interviewer role looks like. I want to show you kind of what the interviewer role looks like. So this is an interviewer that is associated to one job inside of Jazz, and they have an interview that is kind of scheduled for them. So again, the main purpose is you'll be able to schedule this person for interviews. They can come into this dashboard, and one of the cool things is they can come in here and refer this position. So they can easily share the job on LinkedIn, tweet the job, or post it to their Facebook wall. And then, again, they will be able to see a list of their interviews and who their interview is with. And, again, they can come in here and start that interview. So, if you schedule it for them, they'll have a meeting invite. Within that meeting invite, they'll have a link to this interview guide. So, in reality, this person doesn't necessarily have to log in to Jazz if they don't want to. That's one of the major perks of using our interviews tool is this is also meant for non-users or users that don't necessarily need to log in. But if they did log in, they would be able to access the interview guide through the dashboard. So if you guys aren't familiar with the interview guides, I'm sure that we could share out a link to learn more about that, or if you have questions, let us know, and we can connect you with somebody on our team that will kind of walk you through it. But essentially, just really good for capturing feedback. They are mobile friendly, so you can do it from a cell phone, but it essentially kind of pulls up an interview guide that looks like this. They get a little bit of details about the candidate. They can also see the resume, and then they can kind of complete their feedback, and that will automatically go underneath that candidate's profile, and you'll be able to kind of see that feedback and make decisions. So again, that's the main purpose of an interview in here, is to complete interview guides, and if they want to sign into Jazz, they can also share the job. So the next role is the developer role. So the developer role is really meant to help with two aspects of Jazz. They are meant to help with integrating your careers page. So again, there's multiple ways that you can integrate your career page with Jazz. I won't go into all of them in this particular webinar, but the developer is meant to help the HR team set that up, integrate with their career page. We kind of have a standalone career page that might need your logo and some colors added in there. So again, we'll kind of show you what this looks like, but that's the main goal of this role is to help you get set up with your careers page and to access any integration. So if you're going through troubleshooting with connecting to an HRIS system or one of your calendars, you can kind of rest easy knowing that a developer only has access to help connect those certain integrations or the careers page. They don't have any access to anything recruiting inside of Jazz. So let's go ahead and take a look at the developer role. So here's a developer role. So really, again, they can access settings, and they have two kind of tabs within the settings. They have the job board, which allows them to customize the look and feel of the hosted careers page. inside of Jazz, any job widgets. They also have access to the XML feed if you want to build out a more customizable page. And then the second piece is they can access integrations. So if you're using our API in any way, shape, or form, they can access the documentation and the key that they'll need to kind of connect that within here. And then just help with connecting any of the integrations. So again, HRIS, background check companies. A big one may be your calendars. So they will be able to come in here and help you troubleshoot any calendar issues, or really any issues that you're having with the integrations. They'll be able to come in here and help you get set up. So that's really the developer role. I know it's super easy, but highly requested, so you can be assured that they're in there to just do the development work and won't be able to access anything recruiting. So the last and final role is the external recruiter. So like Lila mentioned early in the webinar, we used to have a role called recruiter. And the kind of privileges that went along with that role were really meant for external recruiters. So I'm going to kind of talk to you about how internal recruiter is becoming a thing inside of Jazz now and how that might be important to your company. And we'll go into that right whenever we go into access an external recruiter. But essentially an external recruiter, again, you can limit their visibility to just the roles that they're going to hire for. The main aspect of an external recruiter is they can only see candidates that they are tied to or that they recruited for. So if they added a candidate to Jazz, they will be able to see that candidate and no other candidate within inside of the system unless you were to assign it to that external recruiter. So this is the main goal of this account type is if you're working with a third-party agency or a third-party recruiter, you can centralize all of your recruiting inside of Jazz, but still work with them knowing that they won't have access to your candidates, just to their own candidates. Now, when they do access their candidates, they will have full access to the profile. They will be able to change statuses. They will be able to email the candidate, have discussion with the candidate, loop you into that discussion, which is going to be really good. But just know that they have full access to the candidate profile for those candidates that they've uploaded or that they are associated with. So let's go ahead and see what a external recruiter looks like inside of Jazz. So here is what an example of what an external recruiter would see on a job. So you can see in this case, this recruiter, this is the same job that we were just in, but you can see here that because they're an external recruiter, they are limited to only viewing candidates that they add as a recruiter. So if I were to come in here as a recruiter and I were to upload a test candidate, you could see that under that job, that is the only candidate that I could see. But again, I do have full access to their profile. I can move them through my workflow. I can email them, have discussions, schedule interviews, everything that you may want an external recruiter to do. But again, you have insight into all of that. So instead of managing that relationship through your inbox, you can now manage that relationship inside of Jazz with all of your other recruiting aspects. So that's kind of an external recruiter in a nutshell. Now, what I do want to show you is I mentioned that there is kind of this notion of an internal recruiter. So what is that and what does that mean inside of Jazz now? So I'm going to kind of toggle back to my super admin account here, and I'm going to show you what that means. So in settings, under people, you'll notice now that under every recruiting type, every role type, you'll be able to go into their profile and you'll see these kind of administrative privileges along with this main one which I'll get to administrative privileges in a second, but this main one that I want to talk about is track as a recruiter. So one of the main reasons why these are more access levels, the super admin, the recruiting admin, the super user, and the recruiting user, are because a internal recruiter can be found at any one of those access levels. If you're a smaller company and you have your HR manager that might be recruiting for some of the higher level positions, they might be a super admin in the account, but you want to track the recruiting efforts. You might want to track them as a recruiter, or if they recruit for any position. So kind of all down the line, any role type can be tracked as a recruiter. And the importance there is a couple things. One, you can start associating candidates directly with that person. So they'll be in the list of drop-downs and allow you to say, Devin here can be assigned to a particular candidate, which we couldn't do in the past. So you could only do that with the recruiter role. This is also going to allow reports in the future and filters in the future. Show me roles that include me as a recruiter. So, if you're on the hiring team and you're marked as a recruiter, we can add filters and things like that. And the same with reports. If you want to filter by the candidates that you're recruiting, tracking that person as a recruiter is going to become very important. So to do that, pretty easy. Edit the profile, track as recruiter, and kind of all of that happens inside of Jazz automatically. You'll be able to start associating candidates to them. Essentially, the system notices them as a recruiter, not just a super user. One other thing, too, that they get is all external recruiters and any role that's tracked as a recruiter will get this recruiter link, which allows them to essentially take this link and it takes them to a list of jobs within that account that they can easily apply candidates to. So if they have a candidate and they don't feel like logging into Jazz to add that candidate, they can kind of add them right through the apply form, and through that link it'll automatically track them as the recruiter. So that's going to be one kind of important item that, tracking as a recruiter, you will get inside of Jazz. Awesome. So the last thing that we're going to walk you guys through, like I mentioned previously, is the account-wide privilege overrides and the individual user privilege overrides. So we're going to kind of go in here and kind of take this section by section, walk through first the account-wide overrides and then the user-level overrides. Perfect. So again, account-wide overrides are located in the privilege section and can only be accessed by super admins. So you can see here that this page, although some of the functionality didn't change here, the page got a complete kind of redesign. So instead of these privileges being tied to the candidate or the job, they're now tied to the particular role type that they affect. So you have kind of the general privilege overrides, which includes being able to kind of turn on job approvals, which means only an administrator or somebody that you grant access or approval privileges to can approve positions, which I'll mention this again in the user level privileges. You can also kind of, again, on a per job basis, you can limit that role to just the hiring team. This is more of the account-wide setting. So do you want to restrict all the jobs to the people that are just on the hiring team and have admin privileges? So you can do that here. Next is one for recruiting admins. So in the case where you don't want recruiting admins to see billing information, but they need to see hidden candidates, this is the privilege that you would select. So you would come in here, allow recruiting admins to see hidden candidates. Then the only difference between a recruiting admin and a super admin at that point is the billing information and this privilege section. Next are user roles. So in here, starting at the top, so you can select, so by default, users, both super and recruiting users, can create and edit jobs. So if you want to turn that off, you can come in here, select this, and then only hiring managers will be able to edit jobs in which they're the hiring manager for. So they won't be able to create new jobs, but they can edit, you know, their job that they're the hiring manager on. The next one is, so this is really just more of a data integrity item. So right now, we do allow users, both super and recruiting users, to download, export email resumes out of the system. If you want to lock that down, keep everything centralized to Jazz, you can do that through this override. So this next one is one I definitely want to touch on. This was in here before, but we elaborated on this, and I want to make everybody aware that if this was turned on in your account, it is still turned on in your account, but it now means one more thing. So before, this privilege kind of disabled the ability to edit star rankings on candidates. So again, users would not be able to edit star ratings if this was on. We've now added users cannot move candidates through stages unless they're the hiring manager. So again, if your recruiting users or your super users are in there to collaborate and fill out interviews and lead discussion, but they really shouldn't be in there moving the candidate, progressing the candidate through the kind of workflow. That would be more meant for the hiring manager or maybe the internal recruiter to make that decision to progress somebody through your recruiting process. So this will lock that down. Again, this was a highly requested item. I just wanted to make it apparent that this is now nested with star ranking. So if you turn this, remove this ability, it's both star rankings and stages. But it can be really powerful, especially if you want to scope the ability to move, candidates through your recruiting process to the admins and the hiring manager. And last but not least, we're going to go through really quickly the external recruiters. Again, pretty simple here, but right now, recruiters can see jobs that are marked as private. You can unselect that here. Right now, they cannot see hidden candidates, so again, you can select that here. And then if you do not want your external recruiters to move candidates through the pipeline, select that here. That also might be a very popular one that was highly requested. So that's going to be a good one for your external recruiters as well. Cool. So that's, again, that's kind of front to back for the new kind of roles inside of Jazz. Again, I know that you guys had a lot of questions, and, we will make sure that all of your questions get answered. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Here's some extra resources for you. I know you guys can't click on these right now, but once you get the slide in your email, you'll be able to click on those. And you can always search our knowledge base, and these are also in the walkthrough that you got when that pop-up came up. So you'll be able to click through right in the app and find those. And if we can't get to your questions all today, we'll answer some of them today, but if we can't get to all of them, we will follow up with the support team so that they can follow up with you. So don't worry. I know it's a lot of information and it's kind of dry. It's not the most exciting and flashy thing, but super important. So I know we want to make sure that we get to everybody's questions and answer everything. So one of the first questions we got was how can we allow recruiting admins to view hidden candidates? And that is a simple privilege override in that settings and privilege section. And you can also do that on an individual profile basis just by going to their profile and clicking edit profile and then allowing them to view hidden candidates. So you can definitely set that up either way. So one question here, can you tell us your suggestion for which access level you would suggest giving hiring managers? Absolutely. So I would suggest the recruiting user for hiring managers. They can't access templates and they can move candidates through the stages unless you check that off that they can't. And it gives them the basic access that users had before. So I think that's probably the best one if you want to limit some of their access. They can't see kind of important information, but they can just sort of move candidates through the stages. Let's see here. I'm trying to get through some of the most popular ones. So is it possible to not have access to super users to change templates? So if you want someone to be a user but not be able to change templates, you'll just want to make them a recruiting user. The main difference between super users and recruiting users is that templates functionality, that access. So if you want to make them a user but not have that, definitely make them a recruiting user. If you want them to have a little bit more visibility and access, then make them the hiring manager on that job. Then they'll be able to see the sensitive data and they'll be able to still move candidates through the stages if you have that restriction on, but they will not be able to see templates. So if you do not want your users to see templates, definitely don't make them a super user. Let's see. So is there a way for a super user to access reports? So super users cannot access reports. You definitely just want to make them a recruiting admin. That's definitely some feedback we can take to our product team. If you want to be able to silo a specific user to a job or a department, but also let them access reports. The way we have it, right now, you can't silo it that particular way since all of the information is across, all of the accounts. So that's why the reports is locked down. And if you were aware of the old functionality, no users could access reports there either. So there hasn't really been much of a change there, just a little bit of a differentiation between those different accounts. But that's definitely some good feedback, and feel free to keep that coming as you guys are using this. You can always reach out to our support team and give them any feedback or ask any other specific questions. So yeah, go ahead, Wolfie.
Cool. So I just wanted to give you guys one more thing here. I'm going to share my screen. I do just want to mention that whenever you're adding a new person to the account, we do have this Learn More link, which I'm sure we can share out with this after the webinar. But essentially, this Learn More link takes you to a support article that has a roles and privileges matrix. So this will help you aid in kind of selecting the right role for the right people in your company. So this isn't 100% encompassing, but this gives you a really good kind of truth for what they will have access to and what can be overridden with privileges. So whenever you're trying to decide the new role, this is a really good tool for you guys. I definitely suggest using it. You can go to the support center and type in Help Me Choose or access it through this Learn More link. Awesome.
Thanks, John. We had a couple questions too about the purpose of hiding a candidate. So some people are wondering why you would hide a candidate. That is basically for whenever you hire someone that's going to be using JazzHR regularly, you might not necessarily want to have all of the comments that you made about them during the hiring process visible. So you would go into the candidate profile and click Hide Candidate in the drop-down menu, and you'll be able to hide them, from anyone who's not a super admin by default. So this is just helpful when you do have people in the system that are going to be hiring. Maybe they're hiring for their own job at some point. So a lot of times that information isn't necessarily something you want to share, even if it is all positive and obviously they're hired. So, but you might want to hide them from that. So that's what the hiding a candidate feature is for. Another question here: sharing the job on social media. Are only interviewers allowed to do that? No, actually, you can share your job on social media with any access level. It's found under Refer. When you're in a job, you'll see the jobs has advertise and refer in any job, and you can just click refer there and you'll be able to share your job on social media. So as long as you have access to a job, you're on the hiring team for a job, and you have that refer link, you'll be able to do that. So it's not just the interviewer. We just wanted to put that front and center so that interviewers can come in and share their jobs out. We all know how much everybody likes referrals. So the best way to be able to get those out, everywhere that you can is to, get in front of interviewers as well. Let's see. In moving from the old user to the new super user, can you tell me what takeaways our former users will experience with their new role? So basically, the new super users will have access to settings. That's pretty much going to be the only difference for them right now. So if you want to bump them down to a recruiting user, that access to the settings and templates will go away. So the only real difference in moving them around is moving them through the settings and the templates. So just move them down and you'll be able to easily kind of restrict that. And that'll be similar to what they had before with the extra levels of privileges. Like if you go into anyone's account in your JazzHR account right now and you click Edit Profile, you'll be able to see the individual privileges you can grant someone. So you can always do that on an individual basis and then also on an account-wide basis. So let's see, I'm just looking through some more questions here. I know we have a lot, so I'm trying to get to the biggest ones. So users that can edit messaging and interview and workflow or in questionnaire templates, can they also edit workflows? They cannot. So users, that would be super users who can edit templates. They cannot access and edit workflows. They can only access just the regular settings and templates that are on that account. So they can change the email messages, the interviews, but they can't fundamentally change workflows or how your hiring process is structured or set up. Another question, there were a couple of questions regarding the recruiter account that I just want to touch on really briefly, and then we'll wrap up here because I know we're kind of going close to the time here. And like I said, it's not the most enrapturing topic of all time, so I want to make sure you guys are still awake and have enough energy to do your job for the rest of the day. So we'll do our best to wrap up. So there's a couple questions here about the external recruiter account. So what if external recruiters enter in a duplicate candidate that you already have on that job? And I'm sure this comes up fairly often. And it'll still, the candidate will still submit. So if they've already applied and then a recruiter applies them as well, it'll show the candidate has being sourced from that particular recruiter, and then also it has a duplicate profile that they've applied themselves, or maybe they came in through a referral or something like that. And you'll be able to see a timestamp, when they applied, so that you can track, if the recruiter should get that credit and you need to pay them out, or if it's actually just a regular organic application. So it will come in as being tagged with that specific recruiter. So you'll definitely be able to see the difference. It won't automatically merge or anything. And then we had a question about the recruiter link as well and how it works. So basically the recruiter link is really straightforward. Whenever you make someone an external recruiter in JazzHR, or you track them as a recruiter, you check that little box to track them as a recruiter, they'll get their own personal link that they can share out to any of the candidates or post on their own, and that's how candidates can apply, and that will trigger that tracking. So it's pretty straightforward whenever you're going through and adding in recruiters or you're handing out links. it's really straightforward. You'll hand out that link, the candidate will apply, and it will be easily tracked as coming from that particular person. So it's very easy to use, and as soon as you check that box to track a user as a recruiter or add them in, that link will show up. And then last question about recruiters here, how do you associate a recruiter with a candidate? So if you just click Edit Profile on any candidate profile, you'll be able to select your recruiter from the drop-down. So there's a box for recruiter, and you can just associate that recruiter with a candidate. It's very, very simple. I know we have a lot more questions, and I promise I'm going to get these over to our support team to answer for you. Give us about a business day to respond, but we will get back to you guys and make sure that everybody has their questions answered. And if you do have any other questions, support.jazzhr.com is a great place to get started with that. And then in this resources slide that you'll all get as soon as I send everything out, you will have that help me choose a role, a privilege overrides, roles and privileges overview. These links are also all in the app right now. So if you log in and you go to any user profile, you can click on it and you'll be able to see all these. So it's definitely available, and you'll have a lot of help. And even if you just search roles in our knowledge base, if you go to success.jazz.co, you'll be able to find it too. So that matrix will help, and then the brief overview. So you do have a lot of varieties, but I know that there's a lot of different nuance depending on what you're trying to do. So definitely feel free to write into support if you have any additional questions. And I really appreciate everybody sticking through some of our technical difficulties here and hanging out with us. So like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for joining today.